John Gill was James T. Kirk's instructor at the Academy. Spock is beginning to understand why Earthmen enjoy gambling, and the computer made Dr. McCoy's right Nazi boot too tight. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter Koenig.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Original Series, episode 21 of Season 2, entitled Patterns of Force, written by John Meredith Lucas, directed by Vincent McEveety, I believe is how you pronounce it. This was February 16th, 1968. Where were you, and how you guys doing today?
Doing great. Doing great. February 16th, 1968. Okay.
How you doing, Walter?
Okay.
I got some serious questions for you in just a second, actually. Everybody, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications. If you're listening in, please give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate that. And visit us at patreon.com/the7th-rule to support the show and become part of the team. Walter?
No, let's start with Sirach.
Okay, Sirach.
Yeah. Yes. I'm here, present.
Okay, Sirach. Oh, you mean you want me to ask Sirach a question? Okay. One thing I noticed, Sirach, but I'll save that for later about Walter. But I'll bring this up to you right now. I'm going to be a little honest here. At first, I was like, where is this episode going? It's so on the nose. It's kind of maybe boring. It's kind of maybe like, how do you have two completely different alien races that look exactly like each other and also look exactly like humans? And all these things are running through my nerdy head. And then when the twist and the explanation came along about 75% of the way through the episode, I was like, all right, that's good. I like it. It works. Because as everybody says, well, the trains moved on time. It's a thing they say about Hitler. They're like, oh, the trains moved on time. So that was kind of this guy's explanation.
You're talking about the argument about efficiency and optimization of industry, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I understand that was their turning point. I mean, you know, it's hard to hinge the story on that because I do think that nobody in that century of in this particular the storyline. So, you know, this particular captain, which is John Gill, who was Kirk's instructor. So he's living in the future, and I can't see a future in which the Nazi experience has any interpretation other than a negative one. I can't see a connotation in which you can extrapolate positive outcomes. Now,
especially, let me add, this was written only 20 years after World War II. So then it was even fresher in everybody's mind how bad this thing was. Like, we all know as time wears on, things kind of get dulled or they get changed. This is 20 years ago. Everybody that was in this production was alive when the Nazis were doing horrible things. So that just adds an exclamation point to what you're saying.
Well, yeah, you know, and that just means, like, for me, exactly what I'm saying is that, you know, in a future tense state from this, you know, in which this Star Trek takes place, I don't see Starfleet or any one of the Starfleet personnel reflecting on Nazi Germany and thinking, how can we duplicate that in some type of way? How can we make adjustments to that mindset and make it more efficient or more, you know, better? How can we optimize that so that it actually works out for the good of humanity as opposed to the result that we saw? So,
especially a professor.
So yeah, that's where I think the story has a light hinge that is being, you know, attached to, and it doesn't have that much credibility. But that doesn't take away from me the way I enjoy watching the story play out. For me, it's a journey of watching, a story unfold. These characters go on an adventure. It's a location shoot, so that's something I enjoy. Seeing a location that's, even if it's Earth or an Earth-like location. So those are the kinds of things I like to see. But yeah, I do think the hinge on the story is quite light and not effectively drawn. They didn't really give me a good reason for why this Captain John Gill would end up trying to duplicate that formula. As many formulas as there exist in governance and efficiency and the things that you're talking about, I'm sure by that century, there must be many more examples of ways in which you can uh, galvanize the population, maximize industrial output, and advance society. It cannot be that that's the blueprint. So,
and that's why I said it felt like it was really on the nose, was because I was like, you have so many other examples and so many other things you could do, but picking the most extreme thing loses the subtlety that Star Trek is usually known for, and the nuance that Star Trek is usually they trust the audience more to know this is bad without having to hit them over the head and be like, these guys are literal Nazis, because they're actually like literally were Nazis. I'm like, but of course we're looking at this through the lens of 40 years later, maybe in the 60s, that kind of writing that we become spoiled with, maybe that wasn't there. And by the way, everybody at home, Walter's got kind of a rough, raspy voice, so you'll excuse him if he doesn't have a ton to say today, but he'll join in when he wants.
Yeah, I thought it was on the nose as well, really on the nose. Zion for Zion. How could you be any more on the nose? The thing, at one point, Spock says, this is probably the most interesting point of discussion, because there's a throwaway where Spock says, efficient state run benignly.
Yeah.
The efficient state where we want, but it's certainly not run benignly, and that's the problem. You have the engine, but it doesn't have the right oil, and it is a dictatorship, and it is everything that Nazi Germany was. So we're spelling it out again. We're saying it again, that this is what happens. You have the tools, but they're not used in a productive, positive way. I wanted to say a couple of just curious things that I bring to it personally. I worked with Vincent McEveety before. I did the director of this episode. He was a director on The Lieutenant, which was Gene's show before Star Trek, and I had a very peculiar experience with him. I was doing a guest lead, and as soon as she started rehearsing it, he interrupted me, and I stopped and I listened to his comment, and I started again, and he interrupted me again. And this happened like 3 times. And I said, Mr. McEveety, I'm now anticipating you interrupting me, and I can't do the lines if you keep doing that. And he says, oh, I'm sorry. And he stopped, and everything went smoothly, except that the lead in the show, Gary, what's his name? Come on.
The lieutenant, the lead on The Lieutenant. I'll find it.
Gary Lockwood.
Oh, Lockwood. Yes. He was also in Star Trek. That's what I thought you meant. Yeah.
And so as soon as Vince McEveety stopped interrupting me, Gary started interrupting me. I have no idea why. I've never experienced this on a television episode before, and I did, I've done a couple of dozen, and I said, Mr. Lockwood, I can't work that way. You can't. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, and he stopped, and we carried on, and the show, it was called Mother Enemy, and we nicknamed it Kami Mommy. Because it was ripped from the headlines. It was a story about somebody trying to get into the officers candidate school. I think that's what it was called, OCS. And this was in real life. And they found out his mother was a communist, and they were blocking him from getting in. So that's my experience before Star Trek with Russians.
They're always rushing to get their lines in, huh?
And Bill Wintersall, the blonde Nazi, I'd done 2 plays with. So I knew Bill quite well.
Do you remember what the plays were?
We did a play at UCLA. It was a concert reading. It was my senior year, and I played a young kid. And they did the play again the next year, a fully orchestrated blocked play, but I was gone by then. And I also did The Deputy with him, which was a huge success. Again, a play about Nazi Germany and the Pope's, Pope Pius's lack of involvement in helping the gypsies, the homosexuals, and the Jews. And it was a very controversial piece, and was very, very successful. We were extended twice, and they actually took it on the road after our local presentation. Okay.
Wow. Great stuff. I love how he always gives us so much like historical context. And Walter, you said you've only done a couple dozen shows, but why is it that literally every episode we have here, you've worked with everybody? You're like, I worked with that director, I worked with that actress, this was a model, this was that. Sounds like you've been in like 300 things.
And I worked with most of them on Star Trek. It's amazing. Robert Brown was the lead in The Deputy, and he was on Star Trek. Richard Carlisle, I think that's his name. He played a Nazi in The Deputy, and he was also in Star Trek. Ian, the older gentleman, I can't think of his last name, he was on Star Trek. The only one who wasn't on Star Trek practically was the actor, the very tall actor in The Deputy, who was Alfred on the Batman television series.
Oh, he did all right. He did all right for himself. You mentioned Gary Lockwood. Ryan, what was the
Alan
character?
Napier, sorry.
What was the
Alan
character
Napier.
Gary Lockwood? That was the character?
What's
No,
that?
Alan Napier was the
Alan
actor
Napier.
that,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
he played Alfred.
Right. And Sirach, you were
Gary
asking.
Lockwood, I remember, played a very famous episode of Star Trek, was it?
Yes.
Yeah. So Gary Lockwood, and he's done a bunch of stuff. He played another Gary in Star Trek, Gary Mitchell. Actually, I could look up which season is that? Is that the first? Yeah, where No Man Has Gone Before. So he was Gary Mitchell. But he's been around on a lot of things, Gary Lockwood has.
And I think I saw his episode on the cruise. The last time I was on the cruise when they were running episodes, I sat and watched his episode, and I was like, "This guy's a fantastic actor."
Mm-hmm.
He told me a great story. And I have to couch it in very specific terms because it's also a very dirty story. So let me tell you, but I'm going to do my best not to insult anybody. He was making a film, and it was on a mountain, and he was told to stay close to the shooting space, and there was a little restaurant there, and not to leave the restaurant. But he did. He got out. He walked out of the restaurant, and this is a mountain. He's literally on a mountain, and there are gorillas on this mountain.
Wow.
And he wandered a little too far, and he found himself facing a gorilla. Now, the gorilla's manner of attack was quite quite unusual.
Did it throw stuff at
The
him?
gorilla played with himself
Oh.
and then threw the contents at Gary Lockwood.
Oh, wow.
That's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Oh, wow. Talk about setting your phaser on stun. Wow, that's probably, well, he actually made out pretty good compared to
Well, I
what
don't
could
know if
have
he made
happened.
out, but as they say nowadays, pics or it didn't happen. So,
That is a
all right.
legendary story.
So before I got another 20 jokes coming, so we got to change the subject quick.
Please,
what do you got for
that's-
us, Sirach?
Yeah, Walter, you threw us for a loop with that one.
Through something.
No, here's the thing. I did see that it was too on the nose a little bit for this episode, and that's why I wished, to some degree, there was more of a twist in this episode. I thought they kind of hit on one when they said, this character Doris. She mentioned that, oh, so he's an alien. The Fuhrer is an alien, and I thought they were making like a twist about, maybe the original Fuhrer was an alien or something like that, or time traveler, and I thought that might have been a kind of a twist, but it wasn't. Again, another twist that I would have accepted was that if this Nazi scenario was playing out in reverse, if it was the blonde, blue eyes who were being the ones who were hunted out, and you know what I mean? If it was something different than what we already saw, I couldn't distinguish any differences between anybody.
That's what I'm saying. And to highlight that point, the only people that actually looked totally different from each other were the two brothers. I was like, these two brothers look nothing alike. Not that should take us out of it, but I was already kind of like focused on the fact that they look just like each other. They look just like humans. And the most different looking people were the two people that were supposed to be related, but maybe I was focused on that a little too much.
Just another side note. The real villain in this piece was not Gil, but the character played by Skippy Homeyer.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was not then called Skip Homeimer. Skip Homeimer.
Yes, that's right.
Appeared in an episode, The Way to Eden. He was the guy with the big ears in The Way to Eden. And Skip Homeimer.
Oh, really?
Yes. And as Skippy Homeimer, he was in the movie Tomorrow the World opposite Frederick March, where he played a little Hitler Youth kid who had come from Germany and was propagandizing for the Nazi way of life. So his career as a Nazi extended back to the time when he was like 12 years old.
Wow.
And I saw Tomorrow the World when I was a kid, and I had the duly expressed animosity that one was supposed to have. He did it quite well as a child. Today, all Europe, tomorrow, the world. That was his statement in the movie.
Real quick, just to add to that, the character's name was Severin in The Way to Eden, the other character that Skip Homeier, is that how you pronounce it, Homeier, portrayed. I had no clue that was that guy. But yeah, I guess he was a pretty good, he had the look for it. I played a Nazi once, way back in the day when I was first starting out. Yeah, it was like a Blood Rain short film where I was just in a group of Nazis that got slaughtered up by the good guy, or the good gal in this case. So it was fun. We got to be sliced up and bloodied, and but only one. I don't have the career he's got, and I was never on that. But it seemed like this episode had a lot of these big names attached. Even though I didn't know them, like when I looked them up, I did not recognize the names, but I felt like I recognized the faces. And I don't know if it's just because your mind kind of tricks you into that, or if it's just because a lot of these people had these prolific careers that were just in everything over and over and over again. So you couldn't help but kind of soak up what they look like. But so back to this episode, Sirach, you were talking about the twist or the half twist. I didn't really think of this episode having like you. I agree. It didn't have that big twist. It had an explanation, which was kind of a half twist. Once you got the explanation, you go, okay, that makes sense. It wasn't like a 180. It was like a little 90 degrees or 45-degree explanation as to how this happened, then the explanation as to why it happened. The one minor twist that I didn't understand, and I was hoping the two of you could shed some light on, was the lady. When she was pretending to be one of the Nazis, and then they captured her, they grabbed her, and they're like, oh no, it turns out she's one of us, but she's decorated by the Nazis. So she was a Xeon spy that had infiltrated the Ecosians. Is that right? Am I getting that right? Because I was a little confused as to what her role was.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. I mean, initially they see her getting decorated as this highly, touted, person who was accomplished within the party. So you see her as somebody with an elevated status from the beginning. And then they cut to the cave scene or wherever they were, and she comes with another officer with their gun pointed as if she's caught all of them. And so that makes sense as far as the story. We're like, okay, she's a highly decorated officer, and now she's caught them conspiring to, overthrow or whatever it is. And so the act out of shooting the one guy and him pretending like he got shot and fell to the floor.
That was great. Actually, that was probably the best twist of the episode, to be honest.
That was probably the best twist of the episode, because when he got back up, I was like, wait a minute, did I miss something? I had to rewind.
Yeah. He's not even like rubbing dirt on it or anything.
Yeah, he's not even bleeding. So, so when that's when you put it together that obviously she's in cahoots with them. She's one of a double agent, and they ran a test on Kirk and Spock to see if they were truly on their side. That was their kind of psychological test on them to see if they would be defending them or not. And so that was actually cleverly written. I thought it was pretty good. Again, I'm sorry, Walter, you're going to say?
No, go ahead.
No, you're not interrupting. I was okay. Finishing my thought.
Well, I don't have too much that is profound to say about this episode, but I did see a couple of curious little things. Ooh. One, they whip Kirk pretty well. I mean, there's a lot of bloody stripes across his back.
But they didn't hit Spock very much.
Stands on his back. and Kirk doesn't respond at all to the fact that he's got open wounds on his back, and Spock is standing on it. I thought that was a mistake. He should have at least grimaced, or something. Ooh, it should have hurt.
Yeah, that's a good point. He talked about kind of how heavy Spock was, but not that he was stepping on his shredded back. Actually, let's take our quick break and tease the second observation by Walter, everybody. So everybody stick around. We will be right back on the seventh rule, probably. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the seventh rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter, the observer, Koenig, with great observations. Very quickly, here are the Trivioids of the week. Not a ton. John Gill was James T. Kirk's instructor at the Academy. The Xeons do have a crude interplanetary capability. The Ecosians are a primitive warlike people in a state of anarchy. Ulate is dead. Spock is beginning to understand why Earthmen enjoy gambling, and the computer made Dr. McCoy's right Nazi boot too tight. All right. So, yeah.
What is the point of that? What was the point of the forest McCoy's boot being too tight?
Just comment. I think it was really just to add a little, when, kind of like in a horror film, you can't be at a 10 all the time. You gotta lighten it up with comedy. You gotta sprinkle in some comedy. Oh, it was just the cat that startled me. And then, there's the real jump scare, You always got to bring it down, make people laugh, let them have a break. In this case, it wasn't horror, but it was meant to be tense, heavy. It evokes, this was only 20 years after World War II. It evokes a lot of hard feelings. We're talking about Nazis. We're dealing with Nazis and Hitler and this and that. So I think they just wanted to throw in some comedy to give the audience a breath, a break, a little fun. Bones, that silly rascal, and then get back into it.
Am I nuts? Because I didn't see the comedy in that moment.
Yeah.
I just thought it was incidental and didn't really add anything to the story. However, what I was going to say, which is just about as incidental as the boot, there's only one shot of Chekhov in this, right at the end, where Kirk says, Mr. Chekhov, take us out, or something. And Chekhov turns around and says, aye, aye, Captain, as if we just had a great amusement, we were at an amusement park. And it's totally inappropriate for the moment. And it made me think, we did take, and I think I mentioned this before, we did take library footage. Library footage is footage that you can impose on any story. You can insert it in any story, and you don't need the actor to be there. And that's generally footage that is shot from behind the actor's back, and you get a sense that you know who it is. It's either Sulu or Chekhov or somebody, but you don't have to pay him because you already have it. And I was looking down, making a note when the credits came on, and I don't know if they gave me credit in that episode or not.
You're in the credits, yeah. Well, you're at least in the IMDb credits.
I was getting credit.
Yeah, and it does not say parenthetically uncredited, which means you were in the credits on screen. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see that, so I didn't know that. Okay, that's what I was going to say. Michelle had one line.
Mm-hmm.
Chekhov said, "Aye, sir." And George,
you had a line at the very beginning too, Walter. That was what I wanted to tell you at the beginning of this, was that this episode, Sirach, I'm sure you noticed too, was bookended by the star of the show, Chekhov. At the very beginning, you had like the first or second line of the episode, basically right after the captain's log. You said spacecraft approaching from inner planet. And I'm sitting here thinking, cool, a Chekhov episode. And then you're just at the very end again. But you were the bookends for this episode.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
I'm so humbled by that knowledge. Thank you.
I was expecting this. I was like, oh, we're going to get Chekhov in this story. And then it just became a Spock and Kirk story. And I was like, all right, this is not what I expected. Yeah, and going back to the comedy part that you were talking about, Walter, I thought the comedy aspect was earlier in the delivery when Kirk said, I don't care if you send him down naked. That would have been enough for me. They didn't need to cut to him coming down, trying on a boot and it being too small.
And they gave us comedy right after that, which was him being drunk, if you'll recall. So, yeah.
Right. It was too much in a row.
Yep.
So that's basically what I felt too. I did think it was kind of funny when Kirk does and grabs the hypo spray and gives the Fuhrer an extra shot of whiskey. He's like, forget Bones. He's not here right now. I'm just gonna do it myself. I thought that was funny. But the thing that kind of pumped out to me in one way or another, and I guess this is something that I realize is still very relevant to the language and to the current events that we're currently living through. They mentioned early on in this script unmanned drones with warheads. And they shot down an unmanned drone with a warhead that was coming towards the Enterprise. And I thought, here it is, 1968. They're talking about unmanned drones with warheads, and here it is, 2026, and here we're talking about unmanned drones with warheads. And I just feel like we haven't moved on. We haven't evolved in that category, in the category of just unrest in the world and confrontation. We're still at a place that we're not in an alignment of peace. And so I just thought how ironic that I'm watching this episode that is talking about something that could be from the current events.
In that regard, here, you're absolutely right. And in fact, not only have we not moved on, we reversed course. You know, we're in a desperate situation. Our country is on the brink of losing its democracy. So, yes, everything that's happened happens again, and we can only hope that this too will change. I'm compelled to take a position, and people say, well, we're talking entertainment here. We're not talking about politics. Bull. We're talking about politics. Politics is part of our entire life. It's not just a segment. It is what we are facing every day, and it's scary. I'm sorry, folks, if I sound like I'm preaching, but I'm not going to be here that much longer. But most of you will, and I pray that our country sees the light.
Well, entertainment reflects the politics of the day. There's just no way around that, whether it's social politics or political politics. I don't know if there's really a deviation there or difference, and you can see it in the Star Trek episodes that are written in the 60s. You can see it in the Star Trek episodes that are written in the 80s and 90s. You can see it in the Star Trek episodes and movies of today. It reflects what's going on in the world. So yeah, I mean, of course, they're intertwined, and it's impossible to pull that apart. And there was another aspect. I mean, first of all, it wasn't lost on me that I believe both Leonard and Bill Shatner are both Jewish, and they were 20 years later doing this episode. And so I can only imagine it must have stirred something up within them. I don't know what. I wouldn't assume to try to know what, but I'm sure that there was something that it made them feel and think. But I wanted to ask Sirach about this, because you usually catch these things. So now you're starting to get me to catch this, even though I'm very unknowledgeable about it. The two brothers, I think, were named Abram and Isaac. And I was like, isn't that like Isaac and Abraham? I'm like, I feel like that's definitely a biblical thing, but I don't know who they were. I don't know. Do you know, Sirach?
Yeah, they are biblical characters. Abraham is the progenitor of essentially Isaac, who begets Abraham, and is Isaac's father.
Okay.
And then Isaac then begets Esau and Jacob, and that becomes the 12 tribes come from that. So grandfather of the 12 of Jacob, who is Israel. So yes, all of that is true, and they did use biblical names. I thought Malachon was also a name that stood out to me as having some historical reference. But yeah, I noticed those names. And as a matter of fact, there's a moment in which Abraham becomes Abram, and they take the Ham out of it. It's just, there's a distinction between Abraham and Abram.
See, I know so there's never a coincidence with writing in Star Trek. They always know how it's connected.
No. Yeah,
it's always deliberate. Love it.
Yeah, it's very deliberate, and I like that aspect of it. I just felt like, the writer here, the director, I didn't have any problems with the directing. I thought Vincent, McEveety did a a very good job. It was like it moved fine. It didn't move slowly. The lighting, everything, camera shot. There wasn't anything that made me say, "Oh, this is terrible." You know, it was okay. The things that um, that stood out to me performance wise was when Leonard Nimoy was being dressed down by this officer, and he says to him, you know, look at his sinister eyes, you know. And there was a moment there where I was looking at Leonard's reaction to being described in this kind of a way. He says his malformed ears, you know, and then he goes on to talk about he's obviously an inferior race. And, you know, you see Leonard looking, eyebrow raised, you know, like, you know, the last thing I think is I'm inferior to you. So,
No, but that's absolutely how this kind of thing works. Yeah, that's xenophobia. It's like, look at these people are lesser than, these people are different. These people are sinister. They're shifty. They're creepy. They're crafty. You know, it breeds xenophobia, fear, paranoia. Totally.
You know, another thing I couldn't get over in this episode, I couldn't get over how the guy who just saw them 15 minutes ago didn't recognize them 15 minutes later. I was like, you just arrested them. You caught these people. And
because
then
I think they said he was one of them too. That's why
they mentioned it. They didn't. Yeah, the one guy, one of the brothers, he says, "Is Kagan one of us?" or something like that. You know.
Yeah, and I was a little confused by that too. And then I put in my notes. I was like, are there any real Nazis, or are they all just spies? Like, it was like they got spies everywhere, and there was just that one guy.
I couldn't get that part either. So I was like, this guy doesn't recognize them. He's completely looking at him like he's never seen him before. And you know, you've got Spock here and Kirk. They have very recognizable faces. It's not like they just look like an everyday guy. You would notice a guy, especially if you met a Vulcan with an entirely different set of genetics and green blood. That guy would definitely be burned in your brain. So I just, yeah, it was. I don't know, Walter, if you've ever been to the prop department, but I used to hang around the Paramount lot and just walk around and try to go in as many open doors as I could find. And at some point or another, I would find myself in the big prop storage department that they had there. And I would walk around there just to see like all of these things, you know, antique tables and artwork and things so they can dress up different sets. And I would see these Nazi memorabilia looking things. And I'm like, why are they collecting all this Nazi stuff? And, you know, it's for the purpose of episodes like this. And so what I'm saying is the studios have an entire wardrobe department full of things like this, costumes, set dressing. And at some point or another, I feel like they feel they need a need to use it at some point because it's already in their stockpile. And I feel like, you know, maybe some of those storylines that get constantly recycled over and over again, I don't know if there's a correlation between that and them saying, hey, let's give me a Nazi story. We got all this Nazi stuff.
I have a question. It's very, very significant, and you'll probably have to think about it overnight, and we'll talk about it on the next time we meet. And I hope you will give it the conscientious thought involving profound. Oh, bullshit! What I'm ready.
Oh, damn! I was like, this is great. I got homework.
Like, why is Spock only half dressed after dispatching the Nazis?
I didn't even notice, to be honest.
Look, it's behind you.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, they were, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Also, why did Spock say, when Kirk said, we're going to make a human out of you yet? And the joke was, I hope not. But I'm like, he is already half human. Do they forget this? He's only half Vulcan. He's already half human. Okay. We'll tell you what, guys.
Pretty much, you know, part of the psychosis of how he was approaching the character and how the writers were approaching writing for him. But yeah, I get that part.
You're right.
But he did get a thrill that was one thing they could have. There was a lot of little things they could have explored on a little bit more. He got a thrill out of the gambling. He mentioned that. He's like, I'm beginning to understand why you Earthmen enjoy gambling, and that's because it's an exhilaration, and they could have expanded a little bit on that. He was basically saying, I like this, writing the odds. It may work out, it may not. Yeah.
Totally. And that was his human side sneaking out. And that could have been explored more. That could have been, Kirk could have said, that's your human side. Explore it, go with it. And Spock could say, I don't, whatever. But yeah, it would have been cool to see more of that. I agree. Home run of the episode, though. This is big time. It's baseball season is right around the corner for everybody. Cirroc Lofton, who gets the home run of today's episode?
That's the way I feel, Cirroc.
It's just the home run of the episode. Mm-hmm. Actually, I'll tell you who I enjoyed. The blonde hair, blue eyed guy's performance, the brother. One of the brothers, Abram, the guy who played Abram. What was his name? He's the guy that Walter worked with.
But his real name, Abram, William Wintersole.
Bill Wintersole. That's the guy I did 2 plays with.
Yes,
right.
That I like his performance. Bill Wintersole.
He's a good actor. He was a good actor, very good actor.
Yes, I thought he was good.
What do you say, Walter? Home run of today's episode?
Well, I would give it to George Takei for having the good sense not to
be. Wow. Ruthless.
Yeah, it's hard. This one was hard. It's hard to find something good in this one.
I'm going to go, honestly, we touched on it a little bit, but for me it was, I'm kind of like you guys where I did have to pause and think about it. And I don't want to say by virtue of default, because that sounds much worse than how I mean it. The director, Vincent McEveety, I mostly noticed it in the first half of the episode. I was noticing good shots, good pace. It moved well. The second half, I may have noticed it less, but that's probably because I was finally more engrossed into the story. But I certainly noticed it in the first third or half of the episode. Home run to the director, Vincent McEveety.
Can I interject?
Yeah, please.
I got to be friendly with him, and I pronounce it McEveety.
You're probably right. I'm sure you're right. I don't have McEveety. Okay.
Once we got past the problem of interrupting me, we got to be friendly, and I asked him if he had ever directed theater. He says, "Oh no, it was way too challenging," and I thought that was curious. I didn't realize that there was the sense of separation that if you direct theater, well, and it is true, particularly in television. There's very little directing going on in television. Whereas in theater, you're blocking the actors, you're giving them interpretations. There's lots of stuff that happens. So I thought it was curious that here was a man who was quite successful in his craft of directing television, but he was very intimidated by the idea of directing a theater piece.
Wow. He's right. Very different animal. Very, very, very different animal. But that's cool. Glad you guys ended up being pals.
And I'm going to change my answer, actually, because
cool.
I think I just read my notes, and there was a moment when the music scoring jumped out to me. And it went into the classic Star Trek music scoring. And it's one of those things that you don't really notice until you notice it. And it does bring things to life. So the music composition, the score.
Totally. At the very beginning was when I noticed it, but specifically when they blasted the unmanned probe warhead. There was like that score that we recognized. I was like, ooh, that was really cool. Good stuff. All right. Let's say thank you to more good stuff. And their names are Dr. Anne-Marie Seagull, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Moeller, Anil O, Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manosfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan B. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Cassandra G., Mark Zutkoff, Chris Garris, Linda Pages, Steve Case, Stephen Monk, Jonathan Capps, and of course, Jason M. Oken. Yeah. All right. Many of those people, those aforementioned people, will be in the free-for-all. Up next, we will be right back on The Seventh Rule, starring Chekhov. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton and Walter Koenig. It is time for the free-for-all with... Oh, no, not Melissa, but she'll be here soon. Jason M. Oken is here.
Hi, everybody.
Eve England is out in Wales at a reasonable hour.
Oh.
Chris Garris has a cool To the Journey shirt on.
That's right.
I was wearing mine yesterday, actually. Carrie's got an apropos shirt, as does Cirroc. Mark Zutkoff has 3 cool images, as always, behind him. One could argue for. And Chris McGee is the Dark Lord that actually brings us light. All right. Cirroc Lofton, sorry. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
It's in the high 6s. I would say like a 6.8.
Does anybody have any guesses that doesn't already know?
Yeah, I'm going to give it like just a 7, just a straight 7.
7.3.
I think people like it. I give it 7.5.
Yeah.
Not on my personal score, but that's just, a guess.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a guess of what the users give it. What do you say, Mark? 7.2?
7.2. We'll try that.
I was with Cirroc. I guessed 6.7 before I checked, but I was dead ass wrong. Jason M. Oken is dead ass right. 7.5 on the mark. You know the fandom.
Wow.
You know the people.
On the Jason.
That's a
good point.
That's a generous.
Well, you know the story about the broken clock, right?
Yes. So we just have to wait for one more time today that you'll be right. Exactly. All right. Did we have any non-appearance mentions? I don't think I caught any.
One more piece of totally irrelevant, insignificant data.
Perfect.
Skip Homeyer did a television series, playing opposite my cousin, who was an actor. And it was about nightclubs. They were detectives, and it lasted half a season. So there you are, folks. Now you can feel fulfilled and enriched and totally...
And thank you for that.
Our life is complete.
I didn't want to have to keep going on with that.
Chris McGee gives you applause for that. That was a good one. A lot of connections there. All right. Did we have any, Chris McGee, speaking of you, some kinds of or some sorts of today to really wow Walter?
Absolutely. I heard 2 of them almost back to back. During the little sales scene with Isak asking his new cellmates, "What is it you're making there? Some kind of radio?"
Wow.
Just a moment later, Spock said, "To reach that light, I shall require some sort of platform."
Okay.
Man, that enthusiasm is palpable, Walter. All right. Thank you very much, Dark Lord Chris McGee. All right. Jason M. Oken, please get us started off on the right track by letting us know what you thought of this episode and probably what we missed.
Well, I don't know if you've missed much. It's certainly entertaining. It's to some degree it's unusual because obviously you're dealing with the Nazis, and it was an interesting subject to bring up. Certainly not that long after World War II, and a lot of the people actually lived through that and experienced that. Perhaps a lesson or sort of a moral story was a little heavy-handed. You're basically getting a zoom in on the swastika almost right off the bat. So there's little subtlety to the episode. And some of the stuff may seem a little silly. The scope isn't exactly great. Obviously, you had to shoot this in 6 days. So you couldn't really do anything other than shoot basically on the lot and use Paramount buildings that chancellery looked slightly bigger than the broom closet. And everybody's wearing guns where the leaders are. It's, there are a lot of things that aren't exactly, you'll leave your thinking cap at the door, but it's certainly entertaining for the whole hour. And you basically find, one of the bigger lessons here is that no matter how benevolent you try to make an authoritarian type regime, it's never going to work. Again, entertaining, fun.
Fun?
Fun! It does have humor.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's
wow.
it's certainly something that I think was to some degree prompted by, I think, DC Fontana. John Lucas, who wrote the episode, wasn't exactly known, I think, for his humor. There is a little bit of a story, and I'll tell it since I was pretty short. Apparently, I don't know if the story is apocryphal, but during the filming of this episode, he was on the set quite a bit. And one of the times, I think he was returning either from the offices and whatnot to the set, and he bumped into a gentleman whose name was also Lucas, and he wanted to know whether they were relatives, but John Lucas brushed him off. That other Lucas was George Lucas.
Heard of him, actually.
Yes. So that's an interesting tidbit that goes along.
I wonder what happened to him.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Thank you very much, Jason M. Oken. All right. Eve England is here with her Uhura earrings, if I'm getting that right. What did you think of this episode?
I thought this was quite an odd one. I have to say, I mean, I just felt quite uncomfortable watching it. And I couldn't quite work out whether what it was really trying to achieve as an episode. Because on the one hand, it seemed, it's dealing with an incredibly dark and serious topic. And then on the other hand, they had this level of sort of humor and levity that just didn't quite sit comfortably with me in terms of the subject matter, because it didn't seem to be a parody, or whereas we have now in modern cinema, films and TV shows that are deliberately making a statement through humor, which I don't think this necessarily was trying to do. And I agree with Jason, it did seem like a strange choice to do, when you've got all the Nazi uniforms and all of that, relatively soon after the war. And particularly, I think during that period, there was an increasing level of sort of neo-Nazism, particularly across Europe at that time. So it seemed like an odd choice just overall for me. And I couldn't get my head around the underlying premise that you had this prominent professor, this historian, who for some bizarre reason seemed to have this notion that the Nazi regime was the most efficient. Mm-hmm. And then that he would, after everything he would have known about that period, would then even suggest this, especially presumably he, offered the symbolism and all of the sort of references to SS and all of that sort of stuff, that he must have planted this sort of system in their heads, which when they had this conflict, it just seemed really bizarre to me. So for me watching it, and I get that I'm watching it now for the first time in 2026, where, obviously it's an age away from maybe what the writers and everyone was trying to do with this episode. But for me, what I actually got from this is it felt much more in tune with, the retelling of The Wizard of Oz in the new book Wicked, which obviously wasn't published at the time. But you had Gil here as this literal man behind the curtain who was basically overseeing this this new fascist state. So I thought that, and I'd be really curious, and I didn't have time to look it up, whether maybe the guy who wrote that Wicked book actually got some ideas from this show, because there seemed to be some really interesting parallels with the storytelling there. I mean, one thing I will say, just as a final point, it really sort of hit probably a little bit differently, because I was watching this today after everything we've been witnessing this past week in the news, and it just felt sort of it just hit in a sort of slightly more uncomfortable way. And I certainly didn't really need Spock to kind of remind me of this ever-growing list of all these megalomaniacs, men who are just seeking more and more power and to dominate their sort of spheres of influence. And I think it's quite interesting timing for us to watch it this week of all weeks.
Yep, I think a lot of us did. Thank you very much, Eve England. out safely in Wales. Chris Garris is up next. What did you think of this one, Chris Garris?
Definitely. Well, first off, the timing of getting to watch this one was just very like what but this episode came out for us to watch today and review now, with everything that's going on. Of course, it's my first time to watch it. I did watch it twice today, and it still surprises me that, it was only 23 years after World War II ended, and we're making this already. And I understand there has been other World War II movies, so it's not completely would not be unheard of to do it, but that would be a movie, not on TV within reason. And again, somebody who is a learned professor would even remotely think of using the Nazis as using their mindset and thoughts as a way to bring people together. It just doesn't make any sense. So but now they did, obviously they knew this was a very sensitive subject to be working with, so they did try to throw the humor in there to break up to try to break that up, I think. Obviously, because when Spock is using Kirk as a stool, and he's like, please hurry up, Spock, let's get this over with, when he's melting the lock. So they threw the humor in there as best as they could with an area. And I guess, part of me was wondering, when they were showing some of that stock footage, obviously, I guess they, when you, like Jay said, you have 6 days to do this, they don't probably have time to really cut stuff out. You clear as day see in that one stock footage, there's Hitler going down the street, doing in there in that parade. So again, and, when I read about this, the cast didn't like this episode, really. Not Kirk, William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy were not really, for it, because, it was against them. But, when it comes from the Star Trek standpoint, it does again show, why the non-interference, the prime directive is the prime directive. You need to not interfere, because they really did, until the end, they really did causing damage to these societies, because you had one that was, neither of them were work capable, but still, it was causing issues with those societies in there. And I always like how they do. Again, they always throw a little humor in there to take a little swipe at Spock's ears, even from he says, "You're that helmet is hiding a multitude of sins, Mr. Spock." So they started there and they went all the way on to the movies, always giving him and every Vulcan a hard time about their ears. So it definitely kept me awake. So it's an interesting episode. It's not bad. It's just odd that they would do that at that time and use them as a platform to try and bring us a civilization together. It just was so odd. But anyway, other than that, it's not a bad episode. It's just makes me
odd.
Scratch my head. Odd.
Yeah, puzzling.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris Garris. All right. Melissa Longo has joined us. We'll catch her in a minute. She's driving home, everybody. Carrie Schwent, a.k.a. Crafty Bear. You've actually got a pretty cool background there. What did you think of this episode?
Oh, I honestly went into it prepared to hate it. I liked it, even though you're probably not supposed to like it, given, Nazis, but I actually found myself paying attention through the whole thing. I thought everybody's acting in it. It was great, and it occurred to me, but especially near the end, that the episode is definitely an example of the phrase "the road to hell is paved with good intentions." Because dude went in thinking he was gonna help, and then it just sort of snowballed, as things like these tend to do. I thought the costume design in particular was fantastic. They clearly went to the really good section of the warehouse for the SS uniforms and all that. I really thought Shatner in particular looked fantastic in the jeans and the denim shirt. He looked very handsome, little bit sexy. He looks great in jeans. Had to throw that out there. Now, the actress playing Darius, Miss Nolan, she was wonderful. She was very strong, but I called it in my notes subtly strong. Her hair was fabulous, and it's unfortunate after doing this episode, she stopped acting because of the reception she got from family and that. And I read on, I think it was either memory off or IMDb, I can't remember which. She wasn't told that she was going to be wearing a swastika on her uniform until basically the last minute, and she told the producer she would never have taken the role if she'd known she was going to have to wear a swastika. So I appreciate her sticking to her guns afterwards and saying, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. Because I thought she was great. On a lighter note, a couple things I really enjoyed in particular about the episode. The MacGyver jail escape scene was hysterical. Especially Spock using Kirk as a step stool to get up to the light. That in particular was wonderful. I don't think they used any stunt doubles, and you could tell poor Shatner was really having a hard time with Leonard Nimoy just standing on him. It gave me a good chuckle. And I thought them posing as a documentary film crew at the last third of the episode was kind of genius, especially when they're going inside the headquarters and the two guys with the lights are flashing the lights like directly in the guards' faces so they can't really look at the camera crew very, very closely. I thought that was really, really well done. Yeah, very much liked that. Yeah, I can't remember at what part in the episode it was, but Spock saying, "I can see why you humans gamble." Also, and he almost says it with a smile. That also gave me a good chuckle. So I found a lot to like about the episode. And near the as I was writing down my notes, the idea for the haiku for the episode just came to me in a blink. And according to He Who Is My Husband, he declares that my best haiku yet. He laughed out loud when I finished it.
Wow.
And I titled it "The Cautionary Tale of Johnny Gill." So three lines. Here we go. Do not interfere. Was only supposed to watch. The dude done messed up.
Thank you very much, Carrie Schwent. Mic drop. Mark Zutkoff, what is up? I bet you've seen this one before. What did you think of it?
I liked this episode better in the 70s and 80s when I saw it in syndication. These days, the parallels to Nazi Germany hit a little too close to home to fully enjoy it. When this originally aired, memories of that conflict were still relatively fresh in people's minds. To address this, writer-producer John Meredith Lucas peppered in humor, which could have been seen as inappropriate, but it did lessen the tension. The escape sequence where Kirk bursts out, "I don't care if you hit the broadside of a barn," is probably the funniest, rivaled by McCoy struggling with his uniform's boot. The Zayons have near Jewish names, reinforcing the historical parallels. Isaac, Abram, Davod, and Zayon is close to Zion. One Ekoshan's name, Eneg, was Roddenberry's first name backwards. The score, credited again to George Dooning, has a good martial theme, but the frequent repetition of it weakens its impact. Other composers' music is used too. This is one of 4 episodes in season 2 that depict Earth-like cultures. 2 of them, and this is one, are explained by contamination by Earth or Federation representatives. Thankfully, they are separated during the season by other types of episodes. As Eve said, John Gill's characterization of Nazi Germany as most efficient state Earth ever knew is questionable and has been discredited by some historians in later years. Apparently, though, even in 1968, that concept was widely accepted after the war. And as we know these days, it's the idea that just won't die. Melicon, played by Skip Homeyer, had only a few lines, but immediately establishes his character as a ruthless creep. After the day is saved, Spock jumps the gun, so to speak, when he says that Ecos would make a fine addition to the Federation. Seems premature. And the joke tag with Spock and McCoy arguing fell flat for me, though I do like Kirk's "and hurry" order to Chekhov to leave orbit. And my home pun of the episode, how could John Gill not see that his plan was so flawed?
Thank you very much, Mark Zutkov. They were the flawed couple. Chris McGee is the Dark Lord. What did you think of the... Calm down, Melissa. You're driving. What did you think of this episode, Chris McGee, sir?
Well, I appreciate this episode a great deal more now than in my previous viewings after having just watched it for this review, mostly because of the current political climate in which we live as of this recording, as even Mark observed. Obviously, the message of the episode is quite clear, probably even more relevant now than ever before, and almost ever before. That is that totalitarian efficiency, as Gill called it, is inseparable from totalitarian violence. The machinery of the state requires a scapegoat class to function. And no matter how benevolent the intent, concentrating power in one person invites corruption. In the final discussion between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy about absolute power corrupting absolutely is a lesson I wish our current leaders in America would learn. I'm pretty sure we're all thinking of another name that could easily be added to Spock's list of dictators at the end of the episode. Some observations that I made while watching this. The idea of the subcutaneous transponder was interesting, I thought, but it does beg the question of why isn't this standard procedure on all away missions, especially ones in which the main characters need to blend in with the local population. I recall them using a similar devices in the Next Generation episode, Who Watches the Watchers, but not in First Contact, strangely enough. The episode, not the movie, although it might have helped there too. Anyway, I like how Leonard Nimoy removes his helmet with quite the dramatic flourish. Chairman Enoch's statement that punishment becomes ineffective after a certain point is very similar to one of my favorite quotes from Picard to Gul Madred in Chain of Command Part 2. Torture has never been a reliable means of extracting information. Spock using the mind probe, which I assume is the Vulcan mind meld, to force John Gill to respond to questions while catatonic, is a new application of that ability, one which I'm pretty sure we never see or hear about again. But one nitpick that, as Mark observed, that I'll mention here is that I feel like the resolution was a bit too swift. Kirk saying that the planet is now in good hands seems a bit premature, especially so when Spock follows that with saying that the system will make a fine addition to the Federation, as Mark said. I'll save my other nitpicks for things left unsaid. And for my memorable phrase or word, I do love the quote that the helmet covers a multitude of sins, because that is actually the multitude of sins part is from the Bible as well. But since I generally keep to just words or short phrases for the original series, the one I'm going to choose is semi-divine detachment.
Nice. Very good. Thank you very much. Chris McGee, always great stuff. Melissa, are you able to give us your thoughts on this safely while you're driving around circles in a parking lot? All right. Here we go. We're waiting on that unmute. This is kind of scary. All right, we got you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. Yes, I thought fascinating. I had watching this episode. It definitely held my attention throughout. And the thing that I thought also after it ended was that Star Trek has always been pushing the envelope on what topics they decide to cover. And they're not afraid, or they don't shy away from difficult topics that aren't easily palatable to digest. And I like that. I don't think we should shy away from difficult topics because it makes us feel uncomfortable. These topics should make us feel uncomfortable, and we should talk about why they make us uncomfortable. And I couldn't help thinking how Leonard Nimoy felt wearing that uniform. And maybe you've covered this already, but I would be interested in hearing his thoughts on putting on that uniform. I do have some nitpicks, but I will leave it at that. There was one quote that I'm going to paraphrase that stood out to me a lot, and it was when Spock asked Isaac, I believe was his name, why the party hates the Xeons. And his response was because their hate brings everyone together. We're the reason that I don't know. He said it way better, and it's so tragic because we are seeing these kind of themes in our world right now. Is that we think this hate of others will bring us together when that's, part of my language, bullshit. It's not hate that brings us together. It's what tears us apart. So yeah, that's what those were my thoughts. Anyway, yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Melissa P. Longo. Actually, that brings up something really good for things left unsaid. Jake's final take. Sirach Lofton, any final thoughts on this particular episode? Got to unmute yourself, though, for us, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. When the John Gill, the Fuhrer, was dying in that last scene with Kirk, he says a line. He says, "The non-interference directive is the only way." As if he still could improve upon this idea with like one extra clause, like, oh, if I just made a non-interference directive. And I thought, no, the whole thing is corrupted. Not if you just added one more thing, or if you just had a clause that says we got to be peaceful, or it's not going to fix it. So I thought that was, again, he didn't even come to a full realization at the end. There wasn't even the only conclusion he came to was even historians fail to learn from history, and that they repeat the same mistakes. I didn't really see a full circle moment where he realized this is completely wrong. He added the idea like, if I just had the directive, the non-interference directive. I just didn't feel like that's a full admittance of the mistake he made. They did show the whole Nazi brass, or as I call them, the brass holes.
What do you mean?
No, I wanted to say, because I did mention this in the review about Abram and Abraham, and I think I mixed the two. Abram in the Old Testament becomes Abraham when he's at the age of 99 years old. And I believe it's God that changes his name. And not only that, but it's changed for a reason, because of the meaning of the names. And the meanings the name Abraham means exalted father. And the name Abraham means father of a multitude. And so Abram becomes Abraham. And so they are one and the same person, just with two different names, just for that historical kind of context. The other context historically is They use the swastika in this, and the swastika, although it is visually associated with the Nazis, it does have origin outside of the Nazi Party. The Nazis co-opted that symbol and made it their own as part of the Aryan nation representation. But
I think it was
existed,
India, right?
It existed. Yeah, it's actually the name swastika is a Sanskrit name. And it actually means good fortune and peace. So it was co-opted and negatively, obviously stereotyped because of what the Nazis did with it. But it does have a tradition outside of the 1940s and 30s or whatever, when it became a worldwide symbol of terror. And as a matter of fact, when I went to Ethiopia to visit one of the old churches that they have in Ethiopia, and these churches were carved out of stone 1,000 years ago, those windows are actually, some of the windows are in the shape of a swastika. And I thought, oh, this is, what is the swastika doing there? And it's not meant to be what we now associate it with. And then the last thing I will say is, and this is for Spock and anybody else, never probe anybody without their consent or when they're not conscious.
Ain't that the truth?
I'm just saying.
All right. Walter, do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
No.
Well, you covered them well initially. Everybody, you're just going to have to watch the beginning of this episode to hear all of Walter's thoughts. Thank you, Walter, for powering through for us, because we know you had a really rough voice today and throat, so we appreciate you powering through regardless. All right. Well, thanks very much to Chris McGee, Mark Zutkoff, Carrie Schwent on location, Chris Garris, Eve England, nestled safely in Wales at a reasonable hour, Jason M. Oken, Melissa Longo, somewhere between somewhere and somewhere, for myself, Walter, Sirach, Melissa, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. We will see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.